Hi, I'm Valerie Crowe with Cobb & Douglas Public Health. Welcome to Spotlight on Public Health. Today we will be talking about how to prepare for a winter weather emergency, and then later in the show we will talk about food safety before, during, and after a storm. My first guest is Chandra McElhaney, Emergency Preparedness Training and Exercise Coordinator with Cobb & Douglas Public Health. Chandra, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Valerie.
Chandra, I'd like to start off by talking about how to know when a winter weather storm is serious. What are the signs?
There are really three warning signs to be aware of and to know the difference between the three. There's an advisory, and that's kind of an issue from the National Weather Service that just is a situational awareness. It's to telling you that there's weather coming ahead and to be prepared. It's not anything life-threatening yet. Then there is a watch, and that is more for particular areas, and it's an issue saying that there is a potential for dangerous weather. And then there's a warning, meaning that there's life-threatening serious conditions, winter weather mixes and freezing, maybe rain or ice that is approaching and currently happening in your area.
Right, okay. And what are some basic ways residents can prepare for a storm ahead of time?
There are three major ways that you can prepare ahead of time. You can create a family emergency plan, and what that does is that actually allows you to be more aware of what you're going to do in any type of weather situation, and it allows you to speak with your children and maybe remove any of their anxiety or fear when you practice that plan. Then you'll also want to create an emergency supply kit. And when you create an emergency supply kit, you'll create one for your home. That's more the bigger one, so it would be for each family member. And then you would also want to maybe create one for your car, and definitely maybe leave one at your work. And as we all learned in Snowmageddon, everyone got stranded, so it was good to have those kits.
Right, and you mentioned an emergency supply kit. What does that typically include?
Emergency supply kits, you want to have in an emergency supply kit for your home, you want to have at least, depending on how many family members you have, at least 1 gallon of water per person for about 3 days. If you can have more, but that's the minimum that you would want to have. 3-day supply of food as well, and for mostly non-perishable items. And you'd want to have a battery-powered radio and some supplies, first aid kit, and any type of hygiene supplies that you may need. And a whistle is always good in case you need to signal for help. And nobody really thinks of this, but if you have perishable items and you need a can opener is a good idea as well.
Okay, and I'm assuming medications and glasses and that kind of...
Yes, if you have special needs, then you would want to add those medications in there, as well as maybe documentation or maybe some money. And if you have a baby, add in baby supplies as well.
Right. And what about if you have children? Is there some things you should include maybe to keep them entertained?
Oh, yes. Activities, games. You can do a coloring book and crayons. That's always a good idea as well.
Okay, and what would you say the best way to supply this kit would be?
Keep them in smaller totes, maybe plastic containers. The smaller the better, because you want to be able to grab them and go if you need to get out in an emergency. And storing them in your home, maybe at a cool, dry place. So the garage is always a good idea if you have the ability to keep that area cool.
All right, and after assembling these kits, what do you recommend as far as maintaining them?
You want to be able to change out the expired items, as the non-perishable items will expire, so you want to be able to change those items out and keep the other non-perishable items in a cool, dry place. And as you go along, your needs of your family might also change. So if they do, you want to be able to add in additional items or items you might not have thought of when you had that last disaster that you might have needed.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about pets in winter weather. What do we need to know?
Obviously, you would want to keep your pets indoors if you can. If you cannot, then keep them in a draft-free, dry enclosure outside. And that's kind of big enough for them to be able to turn around and sit down and lay down in, as well as large enough or small enough for them to be able to keep themselves warm if they're out in the cold. And if you use salt or chemicals for your driveway, or your backyard area, maybe your little backyard area to get get the snow or ice off, then you want to make sure that their paws are not affected. It could irritate them or even poison them.
Okay, and is there an emergency kit for pets, and what does that include?
As you would want to have an emergency kit for you and your family, you would also want to have a pet emergency kit. That would include their food, their dog bowls or cat bowls, feeding trays, as well as if it's a cat, kitty litter, and ways to dispose of that waste, as well as leashes and maybe treats or dog bed and blankets.
Okay, great. All right, so let's talk about vehicles. Are there certain things people should keep in their cars or trucks to prepare for winter weather?
Yes, it's always a good idea to have an emergency kit in your car. You can buy them already assembled with flashlight and jumper cables, and flares are really good to have, maybe an emergency vest. But you also want to have water, snacks, dried fruit bars, any type of peanut butter, crackers, and cookies, and windshield wiper scraper, yeah, and reflectors or a cell phone charger as well.
Definitely. All right, and we often hear about winterizing your car. What exactly does that mean?
When you winterize your car, you want to be able to have it serviced. You can have it serviced, or you could do it yourself, depending on how mechanical you are. But you would want to get the tires checked for their tread or maybe replaced with winter tires. And you want to check your antifreeze levels as well as your battery and test its operability. And make sure that you keep your gas full, at least half full in the winter time so your lines don't freeze.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about cold-related health problems such as hyperthermia and frostbite. What are the best ways to prevent these?
Hypothermia is when you are out in the cold and your body temperature runs abnormally low from exposure to extreme cold. So you want to be able to keep your body covered. Same with frostbite. Frostbite is actually when you have exposed skin and it is affected and it freezes. So you want to be able, that the worst that could happen with frostbite is it could lead to amputation. So you want to cover up all of your exposed skin in the cold.
All right, are there any websites that you recommend to help residents prepare for a winter weather emergency?
Sure. You can get a complete list and downloadable forms and documents online at www.ready.ga.gov or www.ready.gov. GA is the Georgia version. And you can also go to FEMA.org or FEMA.gov and CDC.gov to get more information about frostbite and other winter weather conditions and hazards.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that residents may want to consider when preparing for a winter weather emergency?
Yes, in the family emergency plan, you want to be able to create a communications plan. That communications plan would discuss and highlight where you're going to meet up in the event that you can't return back to your home, as well as maybe where you'll shelter if you have to either shelter in place or shelter outside of your home. And it's important to know who's going to communicate with who in a disaster so that it reduces fear and maybe hysteria for especially the younger ones or people with special needs.
Great. Well, Chandra, thank you for joining me today to talk about preparing for a winter weather emergency. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
Severe weather can destroy a home in seconds. There's no time to think, only time to act. Have a kit so you're ready for any emergency. Develop a plan for what you and your family will do before disaster strikes. And stay informed during severe weather any way you can. It can be the difference between losing your possessions and losing your life. Just ask the owners of this house. Visit weather.com/ready and let the Weather Channel help you prepare your family for emergencies.
Welcome back to Spotlight on Public Health. My next guest is Karen Gulley, Environmental Health County Manager with Cobb and Douglas Public Health. Karen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So today, Karen, we're going to talk a little bit about food safety before, during, and after a winter storm. So let's start off by discussing some food safety steps that residents should follow before losing power.
Okay, well that's good because we want to make sure that we're starting out with the right equipment, knowing that we have refrigerators at the right temperature, but how are we going to know that? We have to have a refrigerator thermometer in there. You can get that. It's inexpensive. Get it from any of the department stores. They'll have them in the grocery stores, but make sure your refrigerators are starting out at 40 degrees Fahrenheit and below. And then the freezers, you want them to be about 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And the main thing is that it's going to hold the food hard frozen, and that's a good thing. And then some things that you can do just to, just prepare just in case. Go ahead and get the quarter size plastic bags and fill them 3/4 of the way full of water. Or you can get small plastic containers and fill them with water 3/4 of the way. I say 3/4 of the way because remember, water expands when it freezes, so you don't want them to get too full and pop. But you have those, and then that way you can kind of push them around the food if need be and make it like an igloo effect, and that'll keep the food cold a lot better. And then you want to make that trip to the grocery store and get a few days worth of food. And so definitely you want to aim for the ready-to-eat foods, things that are not going to require you to have to heat up or to cool them down because of the fact that you may have a power outage. So you want to just be on the safe side. And then think about what you have in your refrigerator. Go ahead and if it's not something that you need to use right away, go ahead and put that in the freezer. Freeze that. It may be milk or some food that you've already prepared that could end up, it could be perishable if the refrigerator were to go out. So go ahead and freeze anything that you can, just in case.
Okay, and then what about once the power does go out?
All right, well, you don't want to go in and out of that refrigerator or that freezer. Now, you want to keep the door to the refrigerator closed as much as possible. You want to plan your trips to that refrigerator. And then that way, if you keep that door closed, it's been, studies have shown that if you keep that door closed and it was holding the right temperature to begin with, even if that power were to go out, it can hold that food for about 24 hours. Without that food going bad as far as going out of temperature, okay? And so you don't want to keep opening and closing that door. And then as far as your freezers, it's been shown that as long as the freezer was working well to begin with, if you keep that door closed, it can hold, if it's full of food, if it's a full freezer, it can hold that food up to 48 hours. If it's half full of food, it can hold it up to 24 hours without that food going into the temperature danger zone. So that's really good. And then you could purchase some dry ice, have dry ice or block ice in the refrigerator, and that will help to maintain the temperature. And sometimes persons will say, oh, well, it's snowing outside. Can I put my food outside? Won't that hold? But as far as storing in the snow, that's not really recommended because the thing about it is that, for one thing, you don't know when it's going to start warming up. And then also just think about what else is outside. Sometimes there may be rodents around or maybe stray dogs. You don't want them to get a hold of your food.
Right, okay. And once a winter weather emergency ends, what should residents do?
Okay, so you want to check things out. So we went ahead and made sure that the food was being stored properly. So now we want to make sure, depending on if that power went out and the food may have been sitting there for a while, you want to think about some things. Has that food been out of temperature for more than 4 hours. Now, if it was under refrigeration, then you had some time to work with. And so you want to check it out. So check your food out individually and see, because depending on the type of food, some can hold temperature better than others or lose temperature more quickly than others. And so you want to check. You want to see if you have discoloration in the food. Do you have an off odor? Is the texture changed? Has that temperature warmed up? Okay, if that's warm, then that's not a good thing. So you want to look for things like that. If you have frozen food, look and see if it still has ice crystals. If it has ice crystals, that's a good thing, because that way, as long as that temperature has not risen above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, you can go ahead and refreeze that. So you can hold on to that. But if ever in doubt, like we always have been taught, throw it out.
Right, and I guess that goes back to making sure you keep those refrigerator and freezer doors closed
Right.
during the power outage.
Mm-hmm, right, because you don't want the
Right.
food to start throwing out, for instance, in your freezer, start throwing out. The quicker it starts thawing and gets into that temperature danger zone, that's when bacteria can start to grow. Okay, because all the food needs, well, all bacteria needs is 4 hours in what we call the temperature danger zone. And so you want to stay down below 40 degrees Fahrenheit as much as possible.
Okay. And what are some food items that you recommend to always keep in your pantry?
Right. Well, some of those have already been mentioned. You want to make sure you have peanut butter. And I know some persons are allergic, so keep that in consideration. But peanut butter, it holds, it lasts. And the thing is that most of the peanut butter is shelf stable. You open it up, you can still store it right on that shelf, not unless it actually says refrigerate after opening. So look for things like that. And then you have crackers. All kinds of crackers are out there, so you get what suits you. But we know that the whole wheat and the whole grain crackers have a shorter lifespan. Okay, so you want to keep that in consideration also because of their higher fat content within those. But good energy food, and you can actually use the crackers in place of bread to make your sandwiches, things like that. And to help them to last longer is definitely recommended that you consider vacuum packing them, and that will help them to last longer for you.
Okay, great. And what food items should people buy right before a storm? You know, we always see people running out and getting bread and milk, but I mean, is that what they should be doing? Or
well, if it's right before the storm, I mean, that's fine to go ahead, and that's the time that you can use to get your fresh fruits and vegetables, things like that. But there are other things that you still want to get just to have in the house, just in case. Because, for instance, instead of fresh fruits and vegetables, you can also have, in order to have something on hand at the time, think about your dried fruits. Like your apricots, you have your raisins. You can go ahead and stock up on your cereals. You usually want to get a multigrain cereal, and it's best if you can buy them in the pouches, because if you can buy them in the small pouches, then they last a lot longer. You have granola bars, the power bars, good for energy, and it's been shown that they, stay fresh at least 6 months. So if you stock up on those ahead of time, that's wonderful. You have your canned tuna, your salmon, canned chicken and turkey. Those last a long time, because if they're in the can, they last, they say, up to about 2 years, actually. Now, if you get the ones in the pouches, that's when, they don't last, well, they say they last about 6 months, and that's a good amount of time, too. So it depends on your preference. The canned soups and canned chilies, those are good because you can go ahead and eat them right out of the can. Right. All that's good. And we talked a little bit about the water before, making sure we get enough water for the persons that are going to be in your household. For instance, you want to get 3 days worth of water. And so consider the number of persons in your household and get a gallon per day for each one of them. Because the thing is that you, half of that gallon, that person's going to usually just consume, just drink it. And then the other half can be used for, helping with food or helping with washing. So all of that's really good too. And then you have your sports drinks. like your Gatorade, your Powerade. Those are good to have because especially when water may become scarce, those can help to rehydrate you. Those electrolytes, it's good to get those back in your body, so that's really good also. And then you had mentioned getting the milk, but we want to try to stay away from the refrigerated section of the grocery store as much as possible, although for immediate use, and that's great. But if something were to happen, you also want to have on hand powdered milk, because you can get a good source of calcium and your vitamin D from that, and that really is a good substitute.
All right, and then I want to go back to what we mentioned earlier, just because I feel like it's so important. Now, if the power goes out, how do you know what is and what isn't safe to eat from the refrigerator?
Okay, all right, and you remember to use that 4-hour rule. Okay, 4 hours is what the bacteria would need in order to get used to that environment and start multiplying. So again, you're going to check that product out, check it out individually, and make sure that you see if hopefully you have a thermometer. We don't always have a thermometer we can stick into the food, but we know about the amount of time that power has been out. And so as far as feeling it, if it feels warm already, it's best not to take a chance. Go ahead and discard of that.
Okay. All right, and then if the power does go out, what are some options to cook or heat food?
Okay, well, that's a good question, because you want to think about that ahead. Now, if you have access to the outdoors, you can use the charcoal grill or one of the propane stoves. Those are fine if you have access to the outdoors. But if you cannot cook outdoors, please don't bring those indoors, because that is such a safety hazard. That's really dangerous. And so indoors, try to keep on hand some of the sternos. They may be small, but they give you enough heat that it can heat up small quantities of food.
Oh, that's great. Okay. And are there any websites that you can recommend regarding food safety during a winter weather emergency?
Well, you can actually visit our own website, go to our food service page, because we actually have a link, and it's a really good link. It's in reference to a consumer's guide to emergencies and emergency preparedness. And on there, it covers the whole gamut. A lot of the things that we spoke about today, but things that we may not have had a chance to get to on today's program. So it really helps.
Okay, and then probably also the FDA.gov and
Sure.
foodsafety.gov.
And we have all of those links. If you go to that consumer guide to emergency preparedness, it'll have a multiple listings of
Great.
in there.
All right, and then are there any other winter weather food safety tips that you'd like to share today?
Oh, just be wise. Just be wise. And think ahead, plan ahead, and listen out if they are expecting you to be in for a while. Go ahead and make that trip in enough time that you can get things situated in your home. For instance, when you're storing in the freezers, think about how you're storing, because if something does start thawing out because of the power going out, you want to make sure that you aren't storing your raw meats and the raw fish, raw poultry right there with your ready-to-eat foods, because what's going to happen if they start thawing out? You can get all those juices running, so you don't want to contaminate. So think about those kind of things ahead.
Okay, great. Well, Karen, thank you for joining me today to talk about food safety. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
For more details about the topics we discussed today, or to learn more about Cobb and Douglas Public Health, visit our website at www.cobbanddouglaspublichealth.org. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him opening his own clothing store at the age of 18? 1 in 138,000. Excited to be a part of pop culture, he packed for the big city. The odds of finding someone to invest in his vision? 1 in 4.5 million. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 88. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference.
Wake the sun, tell him that I've begun to dream of things to come, and tell the trees not to look for me. I'm going to find some peace of mind. Wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally.
I did. Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls.
But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that strollers have the right of way on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep, I did. Did you guys
Did you know that kids who eat breakfast have higher GPAs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to say.
Did you know babies should never touch silver? It's really bad for them.
I knew that.
Did you guys know that statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected.
I'm putting that on my blog.
I just put it in mine.
Welcome. I understand you need a little help with your mortgage. Want to avoid foreclosure. Smart move. Candy? Well, you know, you're in luck. We're experts in this sort of thing. Mortgage, rigmarole, whatnot.
Really?
Absolutely. And we guarantee results, you know, for a small fee, of course. Such are the benefits of having a professional on your side. Why don't we get a contract? Who wants a contract?
Here you go, Pete.
Thanks, Betty.
Write a toner.
Sign it. Come on, sign it. Families around the country every single day, saving homes.
We will talk it over with.
If you're facing foreclosure, make sure you're talking to the right people. Speak with HUD-approved housing counselors free of charge at 888-995-HOPE.
Today is Saturday. Today is Saturday. Salad on Saturday, fruit on Friday, throw a ball Thursday. Water Wednesday, touch your toes Tuesday. Let's move Monday, sparkle snacks Sunday. All the healthy children eat well and move a lot. And move a lot. And move a lot. Eat well and move a lot.
60 minutes of physical activity a day and eating well can help get your child healthy. So keep them active and eating well every day.
Skip a rope Saturday, freeze tag Friday, tap dance Thursday. Whole grains Wednesday, try a veggie Tuesday. Let's move Monday, split the sweet Sunday. Eat well and move a lot. Today is Saturday. Yeah. Today is Saturday. All the healthy children, all the healthy children.
Get ideas. Get involved. Get going at letsmove.gov. That's letsmove.gov.